Hello everybody, welcome to this partner session of the Stockholm Forum on Peace and Development. I'm pleased to welcome you here on behalf of civil rights defenders, and I'm Swedish development partner. My name is Jaqueline Duerre and I work on Humanium metal for IAM. And I'm looking forward to facilitating this session with you today, joined by my colleague Anton Eriksson, who will be helping you in the chat function and in the Q&A. And we also have support from David Rundqvist. He will help you with any technical issues. So if you have troubles connecting, look into the email I sent and you can connect with him directly. Let's get started. Old problems, new solutions. I'd say quite daringly called the session a digital lab because we wanted to think together with you here today. We want to discuss innovation towards Sustainable Development Goal 16. That's the one on peace, justice, and strong institutions. And well, we are gathered here on a Friday afternoon in Sweden. I know for some of you it's Friday morning or evening. And it's the last day of the Stockholm Forum. And in some way, I find the timing of this event is quite fitting. Fitting in a sense that innovation is in our busy everyday lives often quite an afterthought. And I mean, there are good reasons for that. No time or resources, but let's be honest, there's also a certain comfort in doing things the way we have always done them. But with the comfort comes also this frustration, this feeling of making little tangible progress and facing the same old problems all over again. I'm quite sure I'm not alone with that feeling, or at least I hope so. But luckily today, we're not going to focus on the problems, we want to focus on the new solutions. And so we'll hear from 3 expert speakers that have hands-on experience on bringing innovation to life. And we'll then have a poll to inform the discussion. So we'll ask you to help us what we want to focus on in the session, and then have a very participatory discussion. And if I say participatory, that means we need you and your input. So please stay tuned and take part in a lively discussion. Just some ground rules for the beginning. Please keep your mic muted if you're not speaking, but feel free to raise your hand. There's a small function on the bottom of your window, or ask anything in the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we loop you into the discussion. Well, then let's just get started. If you have any questions up to now, please just post them in the chat and Anton will help you with them. We don't really have time to make a round of introductions, but we'd like to hear from you who's participating today. So please just be free to quickly introduce you in the chat. So, our speakers, welcome. I have to say, I have to apologize, but on very last minute, our first speaker, Christina Jannebu, she had an unforeseen change of plans regarding her evacuation from Kenya, and so she will not be able to join us today. She sends her regards and apologies, and she and her family are fine, but they will not be able to join today. We have instead Simon Marke Gran, and Simon Marke Gran is the Business and Innovation Manager for Humanium Metal at IAM, and he has been instrumental in basically putting Humanium Metal from theory to practice. Simon is an expert at multi-stakeholder partnerships, and he's very engaging in commercial partners, or he's very good in engaging commercial partners in a way that go way beyond the usual corporate social responsibility. Welcome, Simon. I hope you're here and you can hear us. Simon, I want to ask you, what's your favorite innovation?
I think my favorite innovation keeps changing from day to day. Right now, I'm very excited over an AI chessboard with self-moving pieces.
That's oddly specific. But okay, it sounds very interesting, and it also tells us that you're quite a chess geek. Well, okay, let me welcome Marcin de Kaminsky. Marcin is the director of the Human Rights Defenders at Risk Department at Civil Rights Defenders. And this department is in charge of maintaining the responsibility of safety and security of human rights defenders. And many of them live in really the most repressive countries and contexts. And Marcin is an expert with a very long working history at the intersection of human rights and new technologies. Welcome, Marcin. And would you also let us know what your favorite innovation is?
My favorite innovation, that's really a tricky question. I would maybe be a bit reluctant answering that currently, Jaqueline. Maybe later this session. Thanks.
Sure. And then we'll see. Our third speaker is Johan Pihl. He's the head of innovation at Doconomy, a company that aims to tackle climate crisis with smart banking systems. And Johan is an award-winning, very creative mind who has a proven track record in spearheading innovation labs. And he was involved in both Humanium Metal and the Natalia Project. Welcome, Johan.
Thank you. Thank you.
How do you feel about letting us know about your favorite innovation?
It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. I would say, I mean, in a historical sense, you know, the printing press would be on top of my list. I'm still a big fan of books, so thinking about how books really changed the distribution of ideas is, I think, pretty overwhelming. But I also have a favorite, which is a Swedish innovation called Hövdig. Have you heard about it? It's that innovative helmet based on an airbag technology, and I would love to be in that room when they presented the idea of you know, introducing airbags, you know, covering your head instead of the traditional helmet. So yeah, so I have two right now.
Great. Also, for all participants who are introducing themselves, if you want to share what your favorite innovation is, please go ahead and we'll have a look at it later. But let's not waste any more time and go right ahead. I would like to ask Simon first, would you like to share some lessons learned with us from bringing innovation to life?
Well, for me, innovation is about risk-taking and, in Humanium Metal case, development over a long period of time. It's not that much about policy documents and set structures. It's about finding new ways forward, and in our case, it's about tackling an old problem from new angles. And if you look at Humanium Metal, we had our first destruction in 2016, and it took us till 2018 till we launched the first Humanium Metal powder and its first product. But it was first last year, 2019, that we could honestly say that Humanium Metal works. It was when we got our local civil society programs up and running. And this means that it took us almost 4 years to find out if the innovation would work in a large scale. And I think for IM as an organization, this process has been exhausting. 4 years of believing in a model, but with no knowledge if it would work. 4 years of testing different ways, hitting walls, finding new paths, finding out that we lack knowledge, bringing in new partners, source for expertise that we didn't even know that we needed. And I think one lesson is that for us as a member-based organization, your natural reasons meet resistance and questions from supporters on investing in innovation that goes outside the normal. I mean, to explain for our donors why we should invest in research in different ways to refine metal, it's not easy. And it's also been hard to raise institutional fundings for the same reason. By having the commercial aspects of Humanium Metal, we of course attract a lot of awareness, but we also learn that the context that we work within is not always ready for those kinds of multi-stakeholder perspectives and innovation that goes outside the normal. Then on the other hand, that led to that we created a self-sufficient model in a traditional fundraising world. And I think one other important lesson is that the media breakthrough and external communication around Humanium Metal, it got started in a very early phase in the innovation stage, long before the model was implemented. And the fact that we communicated our vision in an early stage put an internal and external pressure on us as an organization to fulfill what we have showed. And in addition to this, I mean, the media communication outreach gave us the visibility to attract new partners outside our traditional network to bring this innovation alive. So the innovation process within Humanium Metal and the multi-stakeholder partnership have been crucial. And I think that the main innovation in Humanium Metal is actually within its partnerships, when you open up for different actors to bring in new knowledge and new angles. And so when we bring in all these diverse perspectives and actors, it creates a durability for the innovation and change, because we're having so many legs to stand on. So even while it's a long process to get there, it also means that the effects will be longer lasting. And to illustrate this, I would like to show you a very short film explaining Humanium Metal and the innovation more in detail. Thank you, David.
Communities across the globe face a growing threat from gun violence. 200,000 people are murdered by a gun each year, and there are over 2 million people suffering with lifelong disabilities. A gun is always a threat until it is destroyed. Humanium metal is the first metal made from destroyed illegal guns that is available for customers across the world, uniting you with governments, companies, and civil society in a common effort to end gun violence. In cooperation with governments, illegal guns are destroyed and transformed into Humanium metal. Ethical brands create a wide range of products, linking socially responsible customers to those affected by gun violence. Each purchase turns the weapon of violence into a tool for peace, supporting youth to reclaim public spaces as violence-free zones, survivors of gun violence with income generation and psychosocial support, and civil society to advocate for legislation addressing gun violence. Shape the future to end gun violence. Brought to you by IM Swedish Development Partner.
Are you joining in, Jaqueline?
Thank you very much. So very interesting. It sounds like take a risk and get the partners right, if I summarize that correctly. I just want to check in with Anton. Do we have any questions or comments from the participants?
Not currently, but if you have any questions, you can feel free to either type them in the Q&A or use the chat. You can also, if you type to us, ask the questions directly now. We have time for one question.
Wonderful. I'd actually then just like to ask, now that you said Humanium Metal is up and running, how could companies and individuals support Humanium Metal now?
I think that if you look on an individual level, of course, you can be an advocate for Humanium Metal initiatives, spreading the awareness. But of course, as a consumer, and also by demanding how you want your consumption to be, and to put pressure onto the producers. When it comes to governments, I would say that the main contribution would be to jump on the train. The model is there and is ready to be rolled out and contextualized into their reality. And for brands, of course, it's not only about producing, because we are innovating all the time, which means that it's not only about making products, it's also about building different services. I mean, this is one layer, it's the first layer of Humanium Metal, but we can keep adding on it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Simon. Then let's head over to Marcin. With your expertise, could you elaborate for us a bit on opportunities for technology and innovation for human rights?
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. I think that it's important to see the discussions that we are having now in a perspective on, as you say, what can actually technology bring to the struggle for human rights. Before joining Civil Rights Defenders, I spent 4.5 years at SIDA as the policy advisor for freedom of expression in ICT. And one of my main issues or kind of main tasks within SIDA was actually to kind of be the SIDA shark tank for new innovative ideas. So when innovators, brave innovators many times, came to SIDA to present and pitch their ideas, my role was to see if that innovation actually kind of works. Does it float for bringing, empowering human rights defenders and struggles for human rights? And in many cases, actually, the answer would be no. I have seen so many, most likely brilliant innovations, but without kind of the touch of the actual connection to the people that were meant to be addressed within the innovative aspects of contribution, meaning that many ideas, I would say, go wasted because there is not enough connections to the actual beneficiaries of the innovations. And that is why it's so inspiring to work with something that, such as the Natalia Project, which actually is something that hands-on assists human rights defenders in some of the most repressive environments of the world and provides actual safety for those that need it the most.
And could you explain a bit more on the Natalia Project for those of us who actually don't know about it or just have seen some of the pictures in the bracelet maybe, but don't know anything more?
Absolutely. Maybe I could then have the slide while speaking. Thank you so much, David. Yes, so the Natalia Project is one of Civil Rights Defenders' key components when it comes to working for safety and security for human rights defenders at risk today. And it's named after a partner of ours, Natalia Estemirova, who worked as a journalist in Chechnya. And in 2009, she was abducted by unknown perpetrators and was found dead in a neighboring republic. What her colleagues said to us was that if we only would have known where her whereabouts and her location, then maybe we could actually find her in time, maybe could have assisted, or at least could have found who was actually behind the abduction and who could be put as responsible for her death. So what we then developed together with Johan was the concept of the Natalia Project. The Natalia Project is an alarm system, alarm device for human rights defenders, which initially was a bracelet, the Natalia bracelet, that was put on human rights defenders at risk, and then they were trained to trigger the alarm in case of emergency. When the alarm is triggered, there's a GPS signal sent to civil rights defenders, where I'm on duty now, so I have the on-duty phone here. So each and every Natalia alarm is directed to our on-duty service that we provide, and also a number of close friends, activists on the ground that are kind of building a safety net around the targeted human rights defenders. Targeted human rights defender. So if the alarm is triggered, we get a signal with a specific location that is then GPS tracked to the device, meaning that we can actually follow in real time the whereabouts of that human rights defender, and making it possible for us to coordinate support for the human rights defenders, both locally, because we can assist and direct different groups that we know in the city or the region where the human rights defender is located. And we can also start by working with local authorities or embassies when that's possible, or diplomatic missions, to make sure that the human rights defender gets the support that he or she needs and deserves. And that it's really interesting to see, because the alarm is a device. Now we don't use the bracelet anymore because it was too difficult to maintain and develop technically. So we have an alarm device that's not as sexy as a bracelet, but works very well and is really kind of manufactured specifically to be able to resist different climate zones, for instance, and kind of uncareful handling, so to speak. So it's very sturdy. But what was very interesting from the beginning was that if I at SIDA would have had Natalia Project pitched from the beginning, I most likely would have said no. Because from the beginning, Natalia Project was a kind of a communication method to talk about human rights defenders. It had a lot of focus on communicating the needs of the users of the Natalia Project, but not too much on the actual security and safety of the human rights defender. And what has happened since 2013, when the project was started and launched, more and more focus has been put into actually preparing the human rights defenders for situations when the alarm could be needed, but most likely due to the trainings will not be needed to be triggered. So we spend a lot of time on working with security trainings for specific human rights defenders that are most targeted, for the networks of those human rights defenders, the organizations, and trying to kind of pinpoint both risks, challenges, but also possibilities in the closest networks that they have. And by doing that, most of our human rights defenders that are part of the Natalia Project have never been needing to use it. Which is a really, really good kind of result of having the Natalia Project concept as a holistic security approach to the risks of human rights defenders.
Thank you, Marcin. I think that's a really relevant example. I mean, not only this brilliant idea to a challenge where we often think, well, there's not really something to be done, but also to see how you adjusted the project actually, I mean, over time to make it a real fit for the beneficiaries. I think that's a really great example. Wonderful. Let's see whether we have any questions from the participants, Anton.
Not right now in the chat, but there are some in the Q&As, which we hopefully will have time to answer later. I know it's hard for the panelists to answer a question while they're talking.
Yes, but then I think because we are already a bit ahead of time, then we'll ask some questions to Marcin later and just go on to Johan now. Johan, what's your background? Would you explain to us how can we make it possible to actually use innovation for global challenges?
Great, so that's a great question, and I prepared a few slides for this, so bear with me. See if I'm sharing the screen here. Can you see that?
Yes.
Is the slide working? Brilliant. Okay, so my background is in marketing, so I have a slightly different approach to innovation altogether. I worked on the Natalia Project. I worked on the Humanium Metal Initiative. I also worked on a project for Ålandsbanken called Åland Index. Åland Index is also the technology that we brought into Doconomy to create a service where consumers can understand the impact of their consumption. But I put together a few slides just to clarify my approach to innovation. So what you're looking at here could be considered to be a rather traditional innovation model, simply identifying the sweet spot as, the sweet spot between bringing technology, business, and users together. And obviously it's about the feasibility of the technology or the product, it's the viability of the business model, and the desirability of the user. So this is pretty much a traditional model. I think it's from IDEO. Now, for today, I would say that there's a great, great opportunity in adding purpose to this model. And I think that's exactly what we did when we worked on the project I mentioned. So by adding purpose and talking about sustainability as in a broader sense, you're able to actually address really big global challenges. It's also important that an overall purpose gives you the opportunity to attract people to an otherwise rather grueling process, which innovation really is. I think we spent, all of the projects I mentioned are 2 or 3 years of hard work. So, but once again, this is a model I try to use, and if you look at the next slide, for me personally, I try to identify what I call a mutual purpose. Simply looking at it from three different perspectives: from the NGO's perspective, from the consumer perspective, and the brand perspective. And this is quite difficult to do, but the thing is, if you're able to find that connecting mutual purpose, you build a good foundation to then address this challenge. And I think we did that successfully in Natalia Project and the Humanium Metal Initiative. So this is a way to kind of, if you have an idea, you need to make sure these three perspectives correspond to that mutual purpose. This is absolutely true. And why it's important to understand this, I think, is because right now innovation is a buzzword and it's used for everything, and people try to apply it to everything. But I think honestly, if you look at commercial challenges, so, most you'll find that usually they have large resources and small problems, and there's no real reason to have an innovation approach. Whereas if you turn to global challenges, we all know that we have small resources and huge problems, and by huge I mean enormous. I mean, for instance, with Doconomy, we're addressing climate change, and climate change is such a enormous problem coming at us from so many different directions. So I think this is also important to remember that purpose-driven innovation is really when facing global challenges, it's a true breeding ground for innovation. This is just a reminder. I use this all the time. I have a rather unstructured mind, so I need to remind myself that this is probably the most important step. You need to spend a lot of time on defining the problem. If you end up entering into an innovation process without framing the problem in the right way, you will waste time and resources, and that's a big risk. My harsh kind of translation of this is, if you have a unique problem, most likely you'll come up with a unique solution. This is simple in terms of, it's simple when you read it like this, but it's actually quite hard to do, and you need to invest a lot of time in understanding the problem you're trying to solve. I put this in on an emotional kind of reference, because a lot of people talk about innovation. It's a buzzword, and it's fun and fulfilling, exciting, and all that. But the reality is this, it's grueling work. It's long hours. It's late nights, weekends, and anyone that was involved in the Natalia Project or the Humanium Metal Initiative knows that this is true. And it's really about understanding that there's a great risk, like Simon mentioned, and the fear of failure is always there, and the overwhelming challenge of entering into the unknown is clear. But the key here is persistence and resilience throughout this period, and I think also a higher purpose will help people to actually be dedicated to such a grueling process. And I want to end this by saying this is actually taken from a quote that has to do with change, but I think it applies well to innovation. So it's the messiness in the middle that you need to understand. If you look at some of the successful projects that we've been talking about, it's the 2 years of mess that you're dealing with, that you need to prepare yourself for. And that's my short presentation of what I think is important to understand when talking about innovation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Johan. What I hear is that, well, you need purpose and persistence, resources and resilience. Yeah. And
it's a tall order. Yeah, but I mean, I think the most importantly, we have a great opportunity in addressing global challenges, using innovation. Because if you add purpose, it becomes a very, very powerful process.
Thank you very much. I think we have some questions coming in now to the panelists, and maybe before we move into the broader discussion, we take some of them, Anton.
Yes, we had a general question from Geo Census, and I believe David will help you to be able to speak now, Geo, if you want to ask your question.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, hello. I'm sorry, I cannot unlock the camera. But yes, we are Geocensus. It's a foundation that is oriented to work out SDGs with mapping tools. What we're doing right now is working in El Salvador with initiatives to build trust together with communities that are involved in violence and more peace-oriented issues. What we did is to focus on SDG 16, and for now we are training people on the ground to map their own communities. That is to say, we are not going to send people there, we're going to train the proper inhabitants of the Maria's territory, and we will try to take data there. These
Very
are tools.
interesting. Do you have a specific question to the panelists?
Yeah, that was the contest. And the question is, which kind of indicators do you suggest to take on the ground according to the experiences you know on innovation precedent? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that's a very interesting question. I'm looking at the panelists and wonder who feels the most well known with all the SDG indicators. We all know it's often called SDG 16 plus because it's relevant for Agenda 2030 and also covers such a broad range. But Simon, maybe you want to take this question?
Thank you. It sounds like you're doing very interesting things, Cesar, and I would love to have a private chat with you later when we have some more time. And I mean, what I can see when working, especially in El Salvador, and what comes to my mind is that there is a lack of data when it comes to collecting, not at least when it comes to gender-based violence and femicides. That's something that I lack.
Very relevant. And Marcin, I think you would maybe like to add?
Yes, I can add quickly from my end as well that I mean, in my line of work currently, we are most looking into the indicator on Goal 1610, meaning killings of journalists, because that is really kind of interesting for us to understand as a kind of temperature check on human rights and freedom of expression in different countries. But I would really like to have more data-driven indicator measuring on the issue of anti-discrimination issues and inclusive participation in processes. I think that's really something that could be helpful because there's a major lack of indicators or kind of indicator data on that indicator.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I hope this answers your question also for all the questions that we won't be able to cover now. We'll look into them and try to get back to you by email. So they won't be lost on the chat, don't worry. But I think looking at the time, let's move ahead into the broader discussion. Let's try to make this into a bit more of the digital lab we envision. So first, let me thank to all the speakers for their insights, and you'll be involved in the discussion, so don't rest yet. But let's now look at the poll. You should basically see something pop up on your screen right now. Don't waste too much time thinking. But we have put together some options for you based on SDG 16. And just let us know where you think innovative partnerships could or should create change. So you see, for example, violent deaths or lack of legal identities. Just choose your main challenge. Okay. If you have difficulties choosing, that's very understandable. And I hope you can all see the poll. If you have problems seeing the poll, maybe comment in the chat and we'll try to solve it. David will help us. And I think we can end the poll now. And let's look at the results. Okay, so I think leading, leading was 20% each, is illicit arm flows and corruption and bribes. And this will make it very difficult because both of them are exactly at 20%, not giving us any leading example. And the one following is human trafficking. We have the big issues here, don't we? Then I will now do something very Swedish I have been taught and ask our panelists for a consensus. What would you prefer to discuss together with our participants today? Illicit arm flows or corruption and bribes? Simon, Marcin, and Johan, what do you think?
I would vote for corruption. I think that's a huge challenge and a very difficult problem to actually find solutions to. So I would love to discuss that further.
Same here.
I see nodding. So let's go for corruption and bribes, shall we? Perfect. Well, corruption and bribes is really also a really big question. And of course, it's related to so many other issues we actually see in Agenda 2030 and specifically also SDG 16. I mean, Humanium metal working on illicit arms flows is very much related to diversion of arms, which is linked to corruption. And of course, also with the Natalia Project, shrinking civic space, I mean, it's often enabled also by putting pressure, but also by enabling people via corruption. So I think that's, of course, very relevant. And I'd like to hear, preferably from one of the participants we see, why did you choose this one? Why would you like us to discuss corruption and bribes and what to do in an innovative way? Is there anyone who dares to explain to us? We'll give it some seconds. Please just raise your hand or comment in the chat and we'll pull you into the discussion.
Could I say something?
Yes.
I mean, I voted for it because I think it's, if you look at the work at least I've been involved in, it's fairly simple in terms of using communication to have people understand and relate. There's always something tangible. I think, the bracelet for Natalia Project was really about making people understand a greater need, but it was that, way for us to become tangible. And corruption is everything but tangible. It's that invisible hand, the things that go on beyond our we can't really see what's going on, and it's very hard to relate to. And I think, at least from a communications perspective, that would be a huge challenge. And also, how do you track it? How do you measure it? How do you put it in context? I would love to discuss that further.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting aspect. Say it's basically so broad. What are we actually dealing with, and how would we actually get this across to people? And I see that Hans Karel has raised his hand. Also, I want to apologize. One problem I think with digital discussions is we are lacking the name tags with title and honorary title. So if I get your name wrong here or miss out on your honorary title, please be forgiving and just correct me once you basically have the chance. So David, can you help in giving Hans Karel the mic?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Now it's very important, this one. We are discussing Sustainable Development Goal 16, and you voted for different things here. Corruption is one of the most dangerous enemies of the rule of law. And the rule of law is, I think, a precondition for achieving all the 17 goals. And goal 16, with its goal, rule of law and anti-corruption. And I cannot stress this enough. And I would like to draw your attention also in this panel to a publication that is issued by the Raoul Wallenberg Institute in Lund in Sweden and the an institute, a sister institute in the Netherlands. If you Google rule of law, a guide for politicians, you will find a 40-page publication free of charge. That was the idea from the beginning. And it's now translated into 25 languages. And it is so important that this can be circulated around the world. I'm hoping to get an Urdu translation in a few days also, and also Hindi comes to it. But I just wanted to make that point, and I think I just wish you all the best in your efforts here. And Kofi Annan, who was not a lawyer, but he understood better than many lawyers how important this was. And in the panel before yours, there was a Kenyan representative here, and I worked with Kofi Annan in Kenya when we managed to get the parties to sit down, negotiate, and agree on a grand coalition government after the disastrous presidential election in 2007. So this is one of the methods one can use. But I listened with great interest to your interventions here, and I will continue listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hans, for making this very important connection to the rule of law. That is, of course, the foundation to efforts of peace and non-violence. I want to ask, just being curious and obviously not knowing who is participating, is anybody of you working on addressing corruption here in this round? Because then I think it would be very interesting to hear your perspective. I'm just asking anybody who's working or maybe has thought we would really need to think outside the box to tackle corruption. I think it would be quite interesting hearing from you, especially coming back to Johan's example. Was it now Albert Einstein who you quoted with the 55 minutes that you need to face on the problem and the 5 minutes on solution? Old Albert, yeah. Okay. We don't have 55 minutes, but just checking. Anyone wanting to comment on that?
I can maybe pitch in a bit, Jaqueline, just briefly as well, because I totally agree with Hans that that corruption is one of the main challenges that we really need to address. Now, I'm not working specifically with anti-corruption, but I see through the Natalia Project that some of the bearers that we have, as we call the Natalia Project users or the human rights defenders that we're working with, that many of them are working in anti-corruption matters. So we have journalists, lawyers working with to cover local corruption, and also government corruption from time to time. And those are among the most targeted human rights defenders that we have in our networks. And that really kind of puts the spotlight on those individuals that are so super brave working with this massive issue of corruption and trying to make their findings more public or take them to the surface. And that is so needed, because without understanding the issues, without seeing the actual information, it's impossible to target the challenge as well.
Yeah, that's a very interesting aspect. And I'm happy that you mentioned the role of media and journalists, actually. And we also heard from Simon that it was very important to actually have the media involved from the very beginning, to kind of also get a momentum and push the innovation forward. But maybe I think it would be interesting, and I'll ask this to all of you, who, apart from the media, do you think we need to involve? I mean, the traditional stakeholders, of course, but are there other authorities, agencies that we need to think about that might be forgotten about usually?
I think that the problem with corruption is that the problem is not isolated to a specific sector or to a specific branch. This is really an overarching problem that is so systemic. that it needs to be addressed in many different ways. And from our end, what we do is that we support those that kind of find corruption cases and to kind of publicly try to address those when possible. But this needs to be brought up in all the conversations that we have in our sector, which is kind of the broad development cooperation sector and the policy field that also is closely connected, to make sure that we actually tackle this together, because otherwise it's not possible.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And maybe, sorry, Johan, for putting you on the spot, but you mentioned you think it's very interesting to work on corruption, and then you work in the private sector. And I was just wondering, I mean, if you would try to pitch, you know, or find commercial partners, say, well, we realize we really need to work on anti-corruption now.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking about how can you get consumers involved? How could you get commercial actors involved? And I think that it's a very difficult challenge for many reasons. It's simply based, like I said before, because it's the thing we don't know. We don't know about this. It's going on, you know, in parts that we can't really. There's no transparency. But I would say I would start my work on identifying how to get you know, brands and consumers on board. That's the only thing I'm kind of, that would be my initial approach, because I truly believe in you know, the you know, commercial actors being more responsible, and also their long-term impact on you know, industries and politics. Someone said that you vote for a brand every day and you vote for politicians every 4 years, and there's some truth in that. I mean, so that would be my initial starting point. Maybe it's about, you know, what commercial actors are doing business with countries with high level of corruption. Maybe that could be a starting point, some sort of index or a way to track how brands and commercial actors actually continue to have dealings with countries that has high levels of corruption. I don't know.
No, that's very interesting. And do you have an advice in general for especially non-commercial actors that would like to, you know, develop such a partnership with brands and countries? What if you had like one advice to give to organizations such as IAM or civil rights defenders? What would it be?
No, I mean, the thing is, my experience working with NGOs is that you enter into a world of you know, extremely dedicated people with you know, expert knowledge on the problem, and you know, a long history of working towards a solution. I think with all experts, it's always going to be the willingness to step away from the expertise and look at the problem from a new perspective. So if you're supposed to approach a commercial actor, you need to be very open to find new ways of engaging people and consumers. I think the Humanium Metal Initiative was a great success because behind it, obviously, there was a very all the things that IAM is actually doing in these countries that are suffering from you know, armed violence. You know, that we decided that metal itself could represent that complete, you know, long-term work that IAM is doing. But it was the willingness to simplify and the willingness to step away from you know, the expert point of view and instead come up with ideas that becomes more tangible to consumers. That's the key. And you know, it's not easy to do, but I think you know, IAM and civil rights defenders showed the way, really, that it's possible for sure.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's definitely difficult to let go of your expert knowledge and try to look at something from a different angle, and then also from what Marcin said earlier, then also connected to what the people, the beneficiaries actually need, because then you basically have to go back and forth. But I think we have a comment or question from Brazil, from Renahan, David, would you help us in looping him in?
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I'm Renan. I'm here from São Paulo, Brazil. It's just a few comments. It's an honor to participate on this. I really congratulate you all for all your work. And about corruption, especially, I work with in strategies to implement development agendas here. I work with 2030 agenda. I'm part of Global Compact Network here too. And one of the things that I've been seeing here is the bad relations that private sector, government, and social organizations in terms of delivery. And it's a very sensitive thing because in terms of development agenda for the new times, assistance support to the poor, for example, it's just a necessity. But if we stop to work so hard on social welfare, giving space to corruption in the middle of this, and work with economic development, okay, and human development, we cut a lot of channels that corruption are using to put down regions and entire countries, as they do here in Brazil, for example. So I've been working a lot in the middle of this, and it's quite interesting, the results to create effective solutions to build strong institutions and economically communities. So thank you for this opportunity, and be safe. Have a great day, you all.
Thank you very much, Renan. I think it's a very relevant point that with working on supporting people to be economically active in a new way, that's in a way creating a new reality and covering some of the corruption. And I think I just want to ask Anton, was there any questions or comments in the chat that I have missed on?
There are more comments in the chat right now. No specific questions.
Is there a question left that we should answer before we are soon coming to close?
We have some questions in the Q&A, but I just noticed that those who haven't had their questions answered in the Q&A, we're going to save the questions and be able to get back to you somehow with the answers to the questions.
We'll definitely do that. If you have one question you could choose, Anton, I give you full authority.
Okay, I'm going to have to, because there are a lot of people writing right now. That is good.
Okay. A lot of people want to ask us. That's great. That means they're interested. As said, we'll get back to you in writing, or we possibly have another event, but we'll make sure that we'll answer your question. Anton?
Some people were asking about that publication that Hans brought up. But those are more...
There we can share the link, definitely.
There were also questions earlier on from the Humanium Medal discussion and civil rights defenders about replicating those models. And so I think that can be quite interesting about, once we have an idea, also how do we make sure it lasts across regions?
Yes, I think that actually is a question for possibly another event. Say, once you have an innovation, how do you actually implement it? But maybe looking at the time, I'd give one sentence to both Simon and Marcin on that. Marcin, do you want to start?
Well, from my end, it's not very complicated. I have to say, because we work globally. We have 200 partners in 40 countries, and we see that even though our partner organizations are working with different issues, many of the challenges are actually shared. So we use Natalia Project and also other tools that we have kind of in our toolbox globally, and draw on the perspectives and the learnings that we do from each and every partner to make sure that other partners, human rights defenders in other regions can benefit from those learnings. Because my experience is that many of the partners that I work with are so isolated, so they actually think and believe and feel that their situation is unique and that no one understands the challenges that they are going through. but when collaborating in a global project and trying to kind of draw learnings from different bits and pieces, you can actually distill learnings that are, I mean, they're not general learnings, of course, but they're at least general enough to be able to be kind of thresholds, or kind of to open doors, to be door openers for solutions in other countries as well.
Wonderful, thank you for that perspective. And Simon, do you have to add?
I definitely agree with Marcin, and I think that, I mean, we're talking about innovation, and that's also development, so there is no set solution. And I mean, for each country that you will replicate it in, it has to have its own analyze to be contextualized into to their region and their country.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I think so. I'm sorry if we are not able to get back to all the questions or comments in the chat now. I said we'll return back to you, but I'm happy that we had a very lively discussion, and I'd like to ask my colleague Ben Claeson now to give us a quick summary, because I was too busy writing notes and asking questions. Could you give us a quick summary of the learnings you take from this session?
Yeah, so I think there are 3 key takeaways. It was a very exciting conversation. The first is that it's really exciting to think big. I mean, often in this sector, we confine ourselves and we try to meet, like, measurable achievements. But when we're thinking about innovation, it lets us to think about these big interlinked problems, like how corruption interlinks with, protecting human rights defenders and whatnot. And so I think that's what's exciting, using innovation, using multi-sector partnerships and connecting people across geographies, it lets us think broader. But the second thing is, as we develop these processes, you have to integrate a long-term strategic perspective to recognize that the risks that are involved. But if you're able to do that, then you're going to have a more durable model that can then be replicated. And so it's about, when you're designing your organization's strategic thinking processes, carving out a space for innovation, and that's going to help create durable change. And so I think that's the logic you have to go in with. And then the third takeaway I took is the importance of creating mutual purpose between all these actors and making sure that everybody has a benefit, so that they're all invested in the long term. And when you create that mutual purpose, it creates new and interesting ways to get around problems that seem intractable, because you have these diverse perspectives coming in to target the problem. And so if you bring those 3 takeaways in, I think we can create some really exciting new projects.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, thank you very much. Well, thank you all for a very interesting discussion. I think that, at least for me, it was very inspiring in terms of innovation is possible, but also to let us reflect on, it is actually a hard way. Think about Johan's slide on, it's not all unicorns, but also fire. It takes a lot of stamina, as Simon said, and it also needs to be adapted along the way, as Marcin spoke about. But I think it's really great to bring different perspectives together. So let me thank you for all your input. We'll make sure to send the report to you as well. If you have any questions that come up later, feel free to reach out to us via email. Otherwise, thank you and stay safe and stay in touch.